For some oddball reason, I always get the red eye talk here. Out of you and me. So we will struggle through this and try to keep it as simple as possible for everybody today. So I'm going to be talking about the state of the Coldwater fish community. And according to that, we do have Coldwater fish community goals and objectives in our FCGO document, mainly to secure a predominantly cold water fish community with lake trout and burbot as our key predators. And in the metrics that we use that are in the document for each of those, and I'll be speaking to these at the end, are for lake trout, restored to self-sustainability and the dominant predator, burbot and gorgonids, important ecologically. Cisco is one that's not really in our fish community goals and objectives specifically, but it's more in our Lake Erie environmental objectives. That is to establish a native open water planktivore, which would be Cisco back to the East Basin. Provide sustainable harvest of our cold water fish, lake whitefish, lake trout, steelhead, other salmonids. And of course, the sea lamprey are considered a pest species requiring control. In order to tackle those metrics, we have the Coldwater Task Group, again made up of people from all the jurisdictions, plus an entity of other groups, Fish and Wildlife Service, DSO Canada, USGS as well. So a whole slew of people on this. So I'm just a messenger today for all the good work that goes in from a lot of effort. And of course, we have charges to tackle that. Actually, 8 of them, I think, which is the most out of any of the task groups. Mainly reporting on status of most of the cold water species that I mentioned with that. So, luckily for today, I have a talk following us that's going to talk about sea lamprey. So I won't be talking about them at all, except at the end. And then Rich is going to handle some extra work that's been doing on modeling whitefish in his presentation here later this morning as well. So I won't be talking about 4 and 8. So let's dive right in and that shouldn't be where we are. Oh, sorry, we are here. Before we get into the species here, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. There's 2 surveys that I'll be talking to this morning, the Coldwater Survey and the Partnership Index. So just giving you an idea about those, the Coldwater Survey is an East Basin survey conducted in August, gill netting survey. New York covers the blue areas, Pennsylvania covers the green areas, and then USGS OMNRF covers the pink areas. The dots on there are gill net sets, mainly set around the edge of the thermocline and out deeper around the basin in each of the areas by the agencies. The numbers that you see on the screen are the number of unbiased sets. Once in a while we get some warm water intrusion. Nets are thrown out. That happened actually quite a bit on Ontario side in 2016. It's just the way things work out there with the survey. But so those are the nets. Altogether, 120 sets, unbiased sets that the data will be working off here for 2016. And there's also the Ontario Partnership Gill Net Survey, bottom sets and can nets as well too. And of course, that's lake-wide on the North Shore. For today, we're just going to be talking about the East Basin portion of that. So 30 sets in the East Basin and then 9 sets in the Pennsylvania Ridge. Now we're going to talk about Cisco. That'll be our first thing up to that. So Cisco are considered extirpated in Lake Erie. However, we've been catching them since about 1995, almost exclusively by the commercial fishery. There has been 2 occasions that they've shown up in our assessment nets. Most of those, the bulk of those are coming off of the Long Point area, mainly because there's a fisherman that knows to look for them and knows what to look for there. So a lot of them there, but other ones scattered across report in different years, in differing amounts. In 2016, there were three, those are the red squares here, 3 reported catches of Cisco. However, they were not declared, and so we're not quite sure, or not been able to confirm that those are Cisco's. Also of importance here to talk about in a minute is that there has been some larval and juvenile Cisco's that have been caught over in the Huron-Erie corridor area as well too. So one of the big issues that we've been dealing with is, do we have a remnant stock? We've been catching these Cisco's, a few a year for a while now. And there's a great document that was published in 2016 by the GLFC. It used morphometrics and heuristics of a lot of the samples that have been caught in recent days, looking at those. And what they found out is that the majority of the Cisco's that we're seeing are actually these hybridized forms that are more common to the Lake Huron area than they have been ever to historical Lake Erie. So it would appear from that information that the Cisco that we're seeing in Lake Erie are emigrating down from Lake Huron via the HEC. There's also genetic work going on as well too. Wendy Stott at the USGS has been working on that and is still ongoing. She is expanding her range of sampling that she's getting from other Great Lakes in order to compare our samples with. To date, she has not been able to assign with any confidence what the current samples are most likely with, but they are not like the samples from historical Lake Erie back in the 20s. But the preliminary results of this are not inconsistent with what has been concluded with the other survey, meaning that those fish are most likely transients coming down from Lake Huron. With that said, this has been a document that's been in the works for quite a long time within the task group. We feel that there's enough information with that remnant stock issue now to answer that question with some confidence. And we'll be moving forward and be finishing up this document and delivering it to the LEC by the end of April. Moving on to Lake Whitefish. Commercial lake whitefish harvest in 2016 was just under 56,000 pounds. As you can see, harvest peaked in our most recent times back in the late 1990s, another spike back in the late 2000s due to the very strong 2003 year class. But since then, whitefish reproduction has been poor, harvest has fell off, and it's got to the point now where there is no targeted effort in Ontario waters. It's all bycatch. And there's some targeted effort over in the Ontario waters right now. But a 95% decline since 2009 in whitefish harvest. By grid across, the bulk of the harvest is coming from in the fall from the Islands region on the North Shore, and then in the Ohio trap net fishery off of the mouth of the Maumee. There is scattered harvest in each of the other jurisdictions, with the exception of Michigan, but most of those are in very small. At age, one of my favorite graphs, and you can simplify this up a whole lot here, which is great. And I made the green as really the thing that we want to pay attention to here in the more recent time frame. Here for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been the bulk of the harvest is in fish that are age 7 and older. Mainly that 2003 year class is what's been carrying the weight of the whitefish population out there. However, maybe a little encouraging, we do see a little peak of 2-year-olds sneaking in 2016. In our abundance surveys, we have both of the surveys on the same graph here. The gray in the background is our Coldwater assessment. Again, very similar to that trend in harvest. We had peaks back in the late 2000s. Again, peak from that 2003 year class susceptible to netting. Very sharp declines since then of over 90% in our assessment years. Abundances, as we are in more recent years, have been similar to what they've been back in the mid-80s. Very similar trend in the partnership index. You look at the red dot, which is adults 3 and over, sees that same trend, peak in the late 2000s, declining to very low levels in recent surveys. Partnership 0 to 2, which is the blue line with the white squares there. You still see the strong recruitment there of the 03 year class, and then a little blip in recruitment here in more recent years. Looking at a little closer at recruitment, this is age 0 lake whitefish from trawling from various jurisdictions. But again, back in the 80s, we had much stronger recruitment events with lake whitefish than we're seeing today. Again, in the last really huge boom that we saw was from that 03 year class. Not much since then. A little blip in 14 and 15, nothing in 2016. Onward to steelhead. Steelhead are one of the species that are doing great in Lake Erie, and that's because we stocked a hell of a lot of them. There's in 2016, 1.968 million steelhead. Lake Erie stocks the most steelhead out of any of the Great Lakes. With that, we've created a very good fishery, especially in our tributaries. With that, they are our most stocked species and have been in Lake Erie and have been consistently stocked for at the level that they're at now for over 20 years now. We'll talk about lake trout later, but we do have about 100,000 brown trout that go into the lake as well. Just to offset the offshore fishery. By jurisdiction in 2016, the bulk of the steelhead are stocked in New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. It's been that way for a long while. Pennsylvania usually stocks the bulk of the fish there, with Ohio at second. New York stocked a little bit more than normal in 2016 due to some surplus that was available in our hatcheries. Comparatively, Michigan and Ontario stock relatively few in comparison to what gets stocked on the South Shore. There is some open lake and targeted fishery for steelhead, but the bulk of it occurs in the tributaries. And so this is just some tributary catch rates to give you an idea of where we are. Back in the 80s, mean catch rates in that area were 0.1 fish an hour. By the mid-2000s, and again, these are all in tributary creel surveys with there, and sometimes you see the same year on the bottom here, and that's because there was concurrent surveys that were run in 2 different jurisdictions, in this case, Pennsylvania and New York in 03, 04, almost identical results of those surveys. Average fish in this time period is 0.6 fish an hour, which is exceptional for steelhead. In more recent times, we had a big decline in the fishery, comparatively over 40%. In our catch rates in our current time frame average about 0.35 fish an hour. By all means, 0.35 fish an hour still puts you at the very top of the steelhead tributary fishery across the Great Lakes and the West Coast. So our fisheries may have declined from what they were, but by no means are they poor. Moving onward to burbot. Burbot is a species that it was only targeted for a very short time. The catches that we show on here are incidental catches. and they have been very low, under 5,000 pounds lake-wide for about a decade now. Most of that harvest occurs in New York and Ontario waters, in the East Basin. By net, looking around the grid, there was hardly caught just about anywhere. If you look at the X's, those are zero catches with them, and we did have one offshore net in New York that caught 10 burbot out there, but mainly catches scattered along the north shore and then on the eastern edge of the rim of Coldwater. Average catch rates in our Coldwater assessment netting. Burbot is another species similar to the same trends that we saw for whitefish. They peaked in the early 2000s and has been on quite a downward trend across all the jurisdictions since then. Catch rates in 2000 and I would say in the last few years are comparable to where we were back in the mid 1980s before we got sea lamprey control. Very similar trend in the Ontario Partnership Index. Again, peaks back in the early 2000s. Large declines since then, and catch rates in more recent times similar across the east and the east central basin, back to where they were at the beginning of their surveys. Recruitment is also an issue with burbot in Lake Erie. Over 75% of the fish are age 10 or older. However, we did see some signals of recruitment from the two cold winters that we had in 2014 and 15, or 13 and 14. With that. So that is a positive sign since then. So we'll see how those translate. So burbot aren't as high as they once were, but they do seem to be hanging on here. And we do have a positive sign maybe coming from the Huron-Erie corridor. There's been sampling that's been going on there for over 10 years, but actually in 2015 and 16 are the first years that they've ever seen burbot over in that sampling. And they feel that a lot of that may be coming off, or a lot of the catches were near some of their artificial reefs that have been put in there in recent years. So those artificial reefs were built mainly for lake sturgeon, but they may be helping a lot of other species as well too, and burbot might be one of those. Moving on to lake trout, a species that I work quite a bit with. There is no natural reproduction of lake trout in Lake Erie to date that we are aware of, and if it is occurring, it's at very low levels that are undetectable. So the population is basically continue to run by large amounts of stocking. Our current stocking goal is 200,000 fish lake-wide. We've been above that goal for the last 4 years with that, and then a few years before that as well. Various strains are stocked there, but in more recent years, we're keying on 2 of them, the Finger Lake strain, or Senecas, and Lake Champlain strains. Those strains seem to perform very well in avoiding or surviving sea lamprey attacks and wounding. So those seem to be the 2 strains that we key on. I will mention here Klondike strain. You'll see that in a couple other graphs there. They'll be in yellow. Those are a deep water form of Cisco, of lake trout from Lake Superior that went in beginning in, I think, 2003 for a period of 5 years as a test species. And they initially did very well, but they do seem to be petering out, as you'll see in some of the graphs. So lake trout catches, again, seem to be centered mostly in New York waters, a little less in Pennsylvania waters. These are the catch per net in each of those jurisdictions. This lines up with where the fish were mainly stocked. Okay, the bulk of the stocking has occurred historically in New York waters, a little less in Pennsylvania. Ontario has started stocking on an annual basis beginning in 2008 in lesser amounts there, and traditionally their CPEs over there have been sometimes as high as an order of magnitude less than they were in New York. Overall lake trout abundance, we had a huge decline in 2016 compared to the highs that we experienced in 2014 and 15. Magnitude of about 55% decrease when you look at it basin-wide. There, the red line on here is you'll see that in a couple graphs here. Those are our targets in our lake trout rehabilitation plan. That target is in our nets of combined, the yellow bars of 8 fish per net per lift. We have not to date come close to that. In 2016, we're a combined 2.3 fish per lift. And you notice that declines occurred in all jurisdictions. Most notably, New York had the largest decline in 2016, but declines in Ontario and Pennsylvania as well. Declines also seen over the past 2 years in the Ontario Partnership Index as well. They're very similar pattern. Again, the bulk of the lake trout comes from the east and the Pennsylvania Ridge, hardly any from the east central, east part of the central basin with that too, but again, very low catch rates in 2016 in both the Pennsylvania Ridge and in the east. Abundance and age, I left this on the same graph as last year because our bars were up here. I thought it'd be good to show that how much of a drop that we had over the past year. Ages 6 through 8 are 65%, 4, 6, 7, 8 have been the bulk of the fish that we're seeing out in the lake right now. Again, those are some of the Klondikes that we're seeing in the yellow bars right there. Those fish basically 8 and 9. There's a few of them that are at age 6 as well too. Notice the big gap at age 5. That is due to a year where we had very little stocking. And I will comment that although our abundance seemed to decline pretty rapidly, we did catch 2 lake trout that were very old this year. One of them was 31 and the other one was 32 years old. Again, those are finger lake strain fish. Age 5 abundance, again, this is a metric that is in our lake trout rehabilitation plan. And age 5 fish is when we get 100% spawning, they're 100% mature. So these are spawning age fish of both sexes. At that age, we were above this metric in 2014 and 15 for the first time ever in Lake Erie. That dropped in 2016 to below the target. However, that is still the 3rd highest abundance of adult fish that we've seen since 1992. Chris Vandergoot yesterday also hit on this. I just want to let people aware, if you missed his talk yesterday, we do have a very large acoustic telemetry project that's happening with lake trout out in Lake Erie right now to try to really pinpoint where these fish are spawning and the type of habitat that they're using. So if you would like any more information on that, you can see me or see Chris or visit the GLaDOS website. So let's wrap things up here and just talk about our progress towards our fish community goals and objectives with Coldwater. So our metric for lake trout was that they're restored to self-sustainability and the dominant predator. Adult lake trout abundances are below our targets, and there is no evidence of natural recruitment right now. So those both get the big red X's. Burbot and corygonids are important ecologically. Those both get red X's as well too. Burbot abundance is low and declining. We've had poor recruitment for the most part, although there does seem to be a little bit that's happening in more recent years. Lake whitefish population is depressed with that. Fishery recruitment is poor, and harvest right now is very low. And in that regard, as far as providing sustainable harvest of lake whitefish, they are definitely that's not a fishery that's doing well right now, and their sustainability is threatened by poor recruitment. We do have a stable steelhead fishery, albeit that is via stocking. Moving on to ciscos, we established a native open water plankton board. Ciscos are very rare in Lake Erie and currently have little ecological impact. And sea lamprey, Chris will talk about that next, but there are species requiring control. Sea lamprey abundance is showing a downward trend, which is good news. Abundance still remains above our Lake Erie targets. So to sort of give us an overall here, despite our declines in 2016, lake trout still remain the main predator in the offshore waters. However, there's been a substantial decline in our native coldwater fish resources over the past decade, and many are at perilously low levels of abundance. As with all the other task groups, there are executive summaries that are available on the table, and you can ask any one of our members for full reports, and the full report will also be on the GLFC website as well.